the exhibit does explore the relationship between language and foods and its connection to the continent of Africa. Would you be able to speak to some of the examples of this?
Yeah, so one of the ways really comes in with looking at the histories of these foods. So yam is a really good example. The word yam comes from West African languages. Nyame is probably closer to West African pronunciations. And I'm saying West African in general, in part because of the way that the slave trade mixed people up, but also because West African languages, while they are distinct, are part of the same language group. And so those root words, as they translate into words in the Caribbean, they're the same root words in most West African languages. So yam is a really good one. Fufu is another really good one, right? So the word fufu means pounding. It's a word for a particular technique. So if you pound something and then make it into a mash by pounding it and then reform it, that's the verb. Fufu is the pounding to a mash so that you can reform it. And the word cuckoo, which is in Barbados, also comes from that same. It's just a shift from fufu. And again, that some of the times you can hear in West African languages, fufu, the accent is on the U part. So there's in a lot of West African languages, there's an accent. If there's a multi-syllable word, the accent is on the end of the word. So if you hear a word that has the accent there, you can start to think, oh, that probably has a West African origin. Like okra doesn't have a West African origin, but kimbombo, which is what it's called in the Dominican Republics, in Cuba, mostly in Cuba, that's just a West African word, kimbombo. So as you know, if you sort of trace the words around different parts of the Caribbean, sometimes you find like, oh, that's the West African root for that word. And all of the plantain-based foods, plantain is not a West African word, but once you start getting into the foods themselves, a lot of those foods have West African roots. And in Dominican Republic, one of the main central dishes is called mangu, and that comes from a West African word, mangusi, which is again a plantain preparation.
Yeah, it just, as I said, I just find all of this very fascinating. And I mean, growing up, it's just hearing the conversations of my mother's friends and them saying, "Oh, we call this in this island, and we call it this in this island," and they're describing the exact same food type. So it just having that connection, right? So for that particular period.